trial and temptation. When we say trial or temptation, it is something everybody has heard of and encounters it every day and every moment. It is the most common thing. Majority of the believer take it as a challenge, burden, load, struggle, fear, punishment, and many more. We often take it as a tool of discouragement, but only few take it as an opportunity. Have you ever thought what really is trial and temptation? Are they same? Have you ever thought of avoiding it? Is it even possible? Is it from God or solely from Satan? So let's explore what Bible tells us about trial and temptation. Trial, the process of testing the faith of a believer from God in order to promote him or her. Significance of trial. When we win over trial, it leads to the significant reward from God, and the Spirit of glory and of God comes upon us with the crown of glory. And we become matured in the Spirit and more Christ-like. What to do in the midst of trials? Count it as a blessing with a joyful attitude. Like Job, he was confronted by the loss of his wealth, children on the same day, yet he stood firm and took it as a moment to show his faithfulness to God. No such moment as the test of faith. The shepherd boy, David, fearlessly stood in the face of giant Goliath because he understood the will of God and knew that God himself will fight the battle for him. Let the will of God to happen. A mighty man, Abraham, obeyed to the will of God to offer his only son as a sacrifice at the altar with humility and obedience. Ask God for his ways. With a heart that relies in the power of God and his wisdom, David, when he was pursued by King Saul and even by his own son Absalom to kill him, he sought wisdom from God and escaped himself from all the blood. What are the consequences of falling in trials? Lands ourselves in a state of distress until we call out to God. Jonah's disobedience of shifting the direction from God went through a violent storm at first and later landing himself down in the stomach of a huge fish. Only after such pitiful consequences, he realized his mistake, turned to God, and delivered him out of the pain and misery. Stop spiritual promotion and maturity. When Peter saw Jesus walking in the water, he stepped out of the boat and started walking on the water exactly like Jesus. But when he saw the harsh wind hitting the water, his faith was compromised and began to sink. So, trials is asking you to do the will of God, or sometimes it is asking you to do what you may not like to do. But in all such circumstances, know that it is the will of God to elevate you and promote you. Temptation. The feeling that you want to do something even if you know it is wrong. It is solely from the devil. The motive of temptation is the devil's schema to lead us to death. Mechanisms of temptation. Satan uses certain desires of flesh as an apparatus to fulfill the aim of temptation. Deception. It is one of the mechanisms Satan uses to lure and make one fall into temptation. Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent to eat from the forbidden tree. False gifts. Devil brings forth certain things as reward which are actually meant to harm self and let down. Adam and Eve thought they will be like God by eating from the forbidden tree, but instead it led them to their downfall. Persuade. Satan induces us to do his will through our weaknesses in order to fulfill his plans. Even though Judas Iscariot was a disciple of Jesus, his love for money made him sell his own master, which was the result of the devil working on him to take the opportunity when he was less aware. Seduce. The devil takes every opportunity to make us do something we don't want to do. Joseph was forced by Potiphar's wife to sleep with her even though he had no interest in it. He eventually overcame the devil's plan offered to him. The worldly desires may seduce us, but if we are determined to stay in faith, we can defeat whatever comes on our way to let us down. Consequences of falling into temptation: regret, guilt, condemnation, fear, remorse, backsliding. How to overcome temptation? Make no provision for the flesh. Have the renewing of mind. Resist the devil. Avoid worldly company. Engage with godly people. Arm with the Word of God. Endless worship. Benefits of overcoming temptations. Fruit of the Spirit starts to bear in us. It glorifies God and shames the devil. It establishes the persona of Christ in us. Sets good examples to the fellow believers. So, temptation is a desire to fulfill our worldly pleasures and wants. Temptation is not from God, but it is enticed by the devil, and when conceived, it gives birth to sin. Every believer must understand that temptation is meant to overcome and not to fall. Therefore, trials and temptation may sound similar but not same. Trial is asking you to do what you don't want to do, or asking you to do the will of God, whereas temptation is the desire to do what our flesh yearns, and it is not the will of God. Let us also understand that the trial is for believers and temptation is for both believers and non-believers. Romans chapter 12 verse 21 says, "Do not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good."